Page 134. Factor 4. The quota of suitable psychotherapy is still not complete with the creation of new thoughts, feelings, and convictions, which must be lived as practical experiences. Truthfully, difficult work begins, once again, with the fourth factor, and that requires much initiative and partly comprises a repetition of Factor 3. Therefore, an examination of reality must be undertaken, which first raises the outstanding question of whether everything which the psychically disturbed, that is to say, psychically ill, human being thinks and feels actually corresponds to the truth. But that leads in turn to the next question, which has as its basis, quote, "What then?" And in order to clear up these two questions, it is often inevitable that certain risks must be taken in order to create precise clarifications. The risks exist, for example, when the psychically disturbed human being is introduced to an inundation of stimuli which correspond exactly to his or her problems. That means, for example, that the psychically disturbed human being is intentionally transferred or introduced into those situations which were problematic for him or her up to that point, and therefore caused him or her difficulties. The purpose of this procedure is that new practical experiences are thereby lived, and one learns to overcome problems and difficulties in a new, more mature kind, steered by thoughts and feelings. One's own capacity to withstand and control everything unharmed, which had, up until then, led to the psychical debacle, is thereby also recognized. A further form which the examination of reality can take, for example, is role play, which is better known by the term, quote, "role reversal," or parentheses, transactional analysis. In this form, the psychically disturbed human being must get familiar with his or her problems and difficulties from a point of view other than that which he or she occupied up until that point, in order to recognize, comprehend, and resolve his or her problems and difficulties, whereby neutral, positive, equalized thinking and the feelings which arise from it in equal measure are especially important. A further psychotherapeutic and often effective method is the deliberate exaggeration of all burdening factors, whereby the confused nature of the wrong thinking and of the wrong feelings becomes obvious, if everything is correctly handled, and if this method, which is called, quote, "paradoxical intervention," is appropriate. If everything is precisely considered, then, first and foremost, the thoughts must be changed, which, however, is quite difficult, and is associated with manifold methods. Also, the whole thing is thereby accomplished only extremely slowly, and is consequently also a difficult and slow process, which, as a rule, is also marked by many setbacks, and allows a result to often recede again into the distance, and indeed exactly when the hopes for success seemingly begin to be fulfilled. And one thing must thereby still be said, indeed many times over. A self-psychotherapy is only appropriate when the psychical disorder is still mild and can be overcome by means of one's own knowledge and one's own powers. However, if the disorders and disturbances or illness of the psyche are already too excessive to still be treated and healed by oneself alone, then in any case one must consult a psychotherapeutic specialist who has at his or her disposal the necessary knowledge and abilities to work out and use methods specific to the illness. and in each case one must bear in mind that a psychotherapeutic treatment is always to be seen in the context of a longer-term learning process and the process of reshaping the thoughts. Consequently, no short-term treatments and retraining processes are therefore to be expected, because valid here is the saying, quote, "Good things take time." If one gets a successful psychotherapy behind oneself, then that not only means a complete change for one of one's consciousness and subconsciousness, rather it also means that one gets a very painful phase behind oneself, in which one often calls oneself into question just as much as one is called into question by one's fellow human beings. But, joyfully, one slowly, increasingly perceives that one's consciousness and subconsciousness, as well as nerves and other physical autonomic reactions, have changed for the better and for the good, just as have one's strategies for overcoming problems. And, last but not least, one also recognizes and accepts that one's thought reactions and feeling reactions and convictions, which previously determined one's life, undergo a new evaluation and equalize themselves neutral positively. In conclusion, what should still be said on this theme is that the task here cannot be to go into detail regarding all possible psychical disturbances, disorders, and actual illnesses, and to describe the individual psychoanalytical and psychotherapeutic ways and methods. The sense and purpose of the descriptions provided should solely be to point out that which is necessary in regard to a healing of a tormented and suffering psyche. As has often been explained, parentheses, see The Psyche, the book by FIGU, with milder disorders and disturbances, self-analysis and self-therapy can be used and can lead to satisfactory results, whereas with more serious cases, it is absolutely appropriate that a psychotherapeutic specialist is consulted. In fact, it is thus. Whoever has really profound psychical problems should not allow himself or herself to be led by obscure self-healing methods to experiment on himself or herself. Rather, he or she should turn to a reputable psychotherapeutic specialist who has, at his or her disposal, the necessary schooling, knowledge, and lived practical experiences.